I killed the document at 2:17 in the morning, and the screen asked me if I was sure. That little gray box should not have felt like a judge, but it did. Delete for everyone? It asked, calm as a funeral bell, while the cursor hovered over the button that had once cost me my scholarship, my place at Blackwell Academy, and every friend who had ever called me useful. My room was dark except for the laptop glow, and rain tapped the window hard enough to sound like fingernails. On my desk sat an untouched cup of chamomile tea, my student ID, and the printed disciplinary notice from the life I had already lived, except the paper was not supposed to exist yet. In my first life, that shared answer doc had been my ruin. I had opened it once, for less than a minute, because my roommate Mira had begged me to check a question format. By sunrise, the whole honors cohort had downloaded it, changed the title, added answers, used my name as proof it was safe, and walked into the qualifying assessment with the confidence of thieves who believed the lock belonged to them. When the academy traced the document, they found my email in the edit history, my comment on the first page, my login at 2:17 a.m., and nothing else anyone wanted to admit. I was expelled before lunch. Mira cried prettily. The class monitor called me a cautionary tale. The cohort passed. Years later, when the stress hollowed me out and I collapsed alone in a rented room beside a stack of rejected appeals, the last notification on my phone was still from that document. You no longer have access. So when I woke up again in my dorm bed with rain on the window and the shared answer doc glowing on my screen, I did not pray, scream, or ask the universe why. I clicked delete. For 3 seconds after the document vanished, nothing happened. The room did not shake. My dead future did not dissolve into gold. No angel leaned out of the ceiling to congratulate me for choosing correctly. The laptop simply returned to the folder page, and the folder looked emptier than a grave. I sat there with my fingers stiff over the keyboard, listening to my own breath and the radiator knocking in the corner. Then my phone lit up. Mira, Leora? Why did the doc disappear? Another message followed before I could blink. Mira, did you delete it by accident? Then the class group chat began to move, message after message stacking faster than my heart could follow. Who touched the answers? Where did it go? I saved a version, wait. Don't panic. Seraphine has the backup. Of course Seraphine had the backup. Seraphine Vale, class monitor, Dean's favorite, perfect braids, perfect smile, perfect record of arriving exactly when someone else's work could be turned into her achievement. In my first life, Seraphine had never typed a single answer into the shared doc where anyone could see. She had waited for everyone else to panic, then appeared at breakfast with a calm voice and a saved copy on her tablet, saying, "Don't worry. I protected us." By the end of that day, the cohort loved her for saving them from a crisis she had built with her own hands. I stared at her new message now, glowing in the chat like bait polished bright. Everyone stay calm. I downloaded the answer doc before Leora deleted it. I'll redistribute the clean version at 7. Do not message faculty. Do not create confusion. The old me would have trembled. The new me smiled so slowly it hurt. I did not reply. That was the first rule of surviving a trap. Never speak inside the mouth of it. Instead, I opened my email, searched for the automated notification from the document platform, and forwarded it to an address I had memorized in the last life only after it was too late. Integrity office at Blackwell, edu. I did not accuse anyone. I did not write a dramatic confession. I wrote 8 words. I have deleted a suspicious shared answer document. Then I attached the deletion receipt, the access log, and a screenshot showing that the owner field did not list me, because in this life I had remembered to check. The owner was not me. It had never been me. It was a blank external account disguised as an academy template, the kind of detail the disciplinary board had ignored because they preferred a quiet culprit to a complicated investigation. My comment, the one that destroyed me before, still sat in the screenshot above the first question. This format looks wrong. Please verify with faculty. I had written that in my first life as a warning. They had used it as proof I knew what the file contained. This time, attached to a deletion report sent before anyone opened the gates of the assessment hall, it looked exactly like what it was, a warning no one wanted to hear. After I sent the email, I backed up my own clean notes to a private drive, shut my laptop, and dragged my desk chair in front of the door. Mira had a key to our room. In my first life, she used it at 3:04 a.m. to borrow my charger and photograph my open screen. In this life, when her key scraped the lock 20 minutes later and stopped against the chair legs, I stayed silent beneath my blanket and let her whisper my name into the dark. By breakfast, the academy dining hall was boiling. Blackwell always looked holy from a distance. All stone arches, green lawns, and windows tall enough to make students feel chosen. Up close, it smelled like coffee, wet wool, and ambition sharp enough to cut tongues. I walked in with my hair tied low, my blazer buttoned, and my phone on airplane mode. The honors cohort sat at the long table beneath the portraits of former scholars, clustered around Seraphine like birds around spilled grain. She had her tablet flat on the table, one manicured finger tapping the screen while 30 students leaned in, hungry and frightened. Mira saw me first. She flinched, then softened her face into the worried expression she used whenever she wanted witnesses. "Leora," she called, loud enough for heads to turn. "Why did you delete it?" Everyone was panicking. I picked up a tray, placed one boiled egg and one slice of toast on it, and walked to the far end of the table without answering. Silence followed me in ripples. Seraphine smiled. It was a delicate, forgiving smile, the kind that made teachers trust her and made cowards feel safe. "It's all right," she said. "Stress makes people behave strangely before assessments." I saved the version before anything was lost. She lifted the tablet slightly, and I saw the file title reflected in the silver teapot. QA_final_answer_clean_copy. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. That title had appeared in my hearing file, as if carved into stone. This time, it was sitting in Seraphine's hands while 30 students watched her claim possession. "You saved it?" I asked. My voice came out mild, almost bored. It was the first sentence I had spoken to them all morning, and because silence had stretched around me so long, it landed harder than shouting. Seraphine blinked once. "Yes," she said carefully. "Someone had to." I broke the corner off my toast. "And you're distributing it?" A few students shifted. One boy named Ivan looked down at his own phone, as if the screen had suddenly grown teeth. Mira laughed too quickly. "Don't act superior. You opened it too." There it was, the little knife from my first life, polished and ready. I remembered her saying those exact words outside the disciplinary office while I begged her to admit she had sent the link to the cohort. "Don't act superior. You opened it too." Back then, I had cried so hard my words broke apart. Now I chewed my toast, swallowed, and said, "I deleted it." The table went still. Seraphine's smile thinned. After opening it, after seeing enough to know it needed deleting, I said, "There's a difference." Someone muttered that I was being dramatic. Someone else said the assessment was in 2 hours and nobody had time for morality theater. Seraphine lowered her voice, which only made everyone listen harder. "Leora, if you're worried, sit away from us. No one is forcing you to use anything. But don't sabotage the rest of the cohort because you panicked." It was beautiful, really, how she could turn a crime into a community service announcement. I looked at the tablet, then at the faces around her, and felt the old ache of wanting to be believed. It rose in me, familiar and useless. Then it passed. "You're right," I said. "No one is forcing me." I stood, left my tray untouched, and walked out while the whole table whispered my name like a diagnosis. The qualifying assessment was not just an exam. At Blackwell, it was a sorting machine disguised as a tradition. The top 30 candidates entered the Crown Fellowship track, the middle survived with ordinary scholarships, and the bottom disappeared into family disappointment and polite institutional forgetfulness. The academy pretended it measured knowledge, but everyone knew it measured access. Who had private tutors, who had legacy mentors, who knew which faculty assistant drank enough to talk at alumni dinners. In my first life, I had studied honestly, because I thought being poor made honesty my only safe possession. Seraphine had understood the game better. She knew honest students were useful because they could be framed by people with cleaner shoes. That morning, The old campus seemed to watch me as I crossed the courtyard alone. The statue of Blackwell's founder pointed toward the library with one bronze finger, as if accusing me of having a spine. Near the fountain, I saw 3 students crouched behind a column, phones tilted together, scrolling through Seraphine's saved copy. In the cloister, 2 more were whispering answers under their breath. By the examination building, Mira waited under the arch with her arms folded. "You're really going to pretend you're innocent?" she asked when I reached her. She looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but in the way a match looks small once you have seen the house it burns down. "I am innocent," I said. "That's why it sounds like pretending to you." Her eyes flashed. "Seraphine saved everyone. You just want to be special." "No," I said. "I just don't want to be available." I stepped around her and entered the building before she could decide whether to cry. Inside the lobby, the first pattern interruption arrived early. There were too many proctors. In my first life, there had been 4 at check-in, bored and underpaid, scanning IDs while students rushed past them with trembling hands. This time, there were 12, including 2 I recognized from my disciplinary hearing: Deputy Marshal Rourke from Assessment Security and Professor Elian Voss, the chair of Academic Integrity, a man with silver hair and a voice so gentle it made bad news sound like weather. My pulse stumbled when I saw him, because memory is not obedient just because time has changed. I remembered his office, his folded hands, his sentence. "Miss Arden, whether you created the document or merely enabled it, the result is the same." Now he stood beside the check-in scanners holding a clipboard, watching the entrance with a patience that felt surgical. His gaze moved over me, paused for half a second, and moved on.
"No accusation. No recognition."
Good. My email had reached someone. I checked in with my ID, placed my clear pencil case on the inspection tray, and answered every question the proctor asked. "Do you possess external notes?" "No." "Do you possess any unauthorized digital material?" "No." "Have you accessed any assessment-related shared document after midnight?" I looked up. That question had not existed in my first life. Behind me, a boy inhaled sharply. I answered, "I accessed a suspicious document at 2:17 a.m., deleted it, and reported it to the integrity office." The proctor's hand stopped over the tablet. Professor Voss turned his head. For one breath, the lobby noise faded until I could hear rain sliding off umbrellas outside. Then the proctor nodded and said, "Report received. Proceed to Hall 3. The cohort behind me did not proceed so easily. I heard the first crack before I reached the corridor. "What do you mean by shared document?" A girl snapped, too loudly. Another voice said, "It was a study guide." Someone else whispered, "Delete the chat." I kept walking. That was the second rule of surviving a trap. After you set down the truth, do not stand close enough to get hit by the lie when it explodes. Hall 3 smelled like sharpened pencils and floor polish. I sat in the 3rd row, not my assigned center seat from the first life, because this time the proctor directed me to a different place after checking my incident report. The desk was bare except for an answer booklet stamped with my candidate number and a sealed packet face down beneath it. I placed my hands flat on my knees and breathed. Around me, ordinary candidates arrived in waves, nervous, pale, whispering formulas and case names and dates. I wanted to feel calm, but the body does not forget humiliation just because the mind has evidence. My palms sweated. My throat tightened. A ridiculous part of me wondered whether Seraphine would still find a way to turn the room against me. She had a gift for that. In my first life, even after the academy punished me, people said she had been gracious not to testify harshly. They forgot she was the one who carried the saved copy to breakfast. They forgot she was the one who told everyone the file was clean. They forgot because she smiled like a girl raised by sunlight, and I had looked like a girl raised by overdue bills. Then the hallway outside erupted. It began with Myra's voice, high and wounded. But Seraphine said it was safe. A murmur rolled through the hall. Chairs scraped as students turned toward the doors. The chief proctor raised one hand, eyes forward. No one obeyed quickly enough. Through the narrow glass panel, I could see fragments. Navy blazers packed in the lobby, proctors forming a line, Seraphine standing very straight with her tablet clutched against her chest. Professor Voss said something I could not hear. Seraphine shook her head, braids swinging, face pale but controlled. I knew that expression. It was the expression she wore when a teacher caught a mistake, and she needed the room to believe the mistake had wounded her personally. Then Deputy Marshal Rourke held up a printed sheet. Even through the glass, I recognized the title. QA_final_answer_clean_hobby. The title looked uglier in daylight. A boy near the door whispered, "Is that the answer, Doc?" The chief proctor repeated, sharper, eyes forward. This time, we obeyed. My heart beat so hard I felt it in my teeth. A minute passed. Then another. The sealed exam packet on my desk looked suddenly alive. If Seraphine was stopped before the exam began, why did dread still coil in my ribs? Because I knew Blackwell. I knew wealthy families. I knew a scandal could be softened if enough parents arrived before the paperwork dried. The cohort had to expose itself fully, publicly, and in a way the Academy could not bury. Deleting the shared doc had only lit the fuse. The explosion needed witnesses. The bell rang at 9, but the exam did not start. Instead, Professor Voss entered Hall 3 with Deputy Marshal Rourke and 2 proctors carrying gray evidence bins. Every candidate sat frozen. Voss did not raise his voice.
He never needed to.
Before sealed packets are opened, he said, the Academy is conducting a mandatory integrity verification for this sitting. A collective breath moved across the hall. He continued, candidates who accessed, saved, distributed, or relied upon a document purporting to contain final answers for today's assessment must surrender their devices and identify themselves now. Voluntary disclosure before packet opening will be considered in disciplinary classification. Failure to disclose will result in immediate disqualification and referral. Nobody moved. Of course, nobody moved. Shame makes people stupid, but hope makes them suicidal. I stared at the knot in the wood grain on my desk and counted my breaths.
5, 6, 7.
From the lobby, someone sobbed. Voss waited.
Very well, he said.
Rourke opened the first evidence bin and began reading candidate numbers from a list. Not names. Numbers. Clean, official, merciless. C014. C022. C027. C031. With every number, a student somewhere in the hall stiffened or rose. Most were from Seraphine's breakfast circle. Some were not. The shared copy had traveled beyond the honors table, just as it had in my first life. Phones and tablets went into labeled bags. Candidates were escorted out one by one, faces white, mouths moving around excuses no one had invited. Then Rourke read, C001. Seraphine's number. She entered Hall 3 like a queen being forced through a servant's door. Even then, she tried to perform. Her chin stayed lifted. Her eyes shone but did not spill. Her voice was steady enough to convince anyone desperate for comfort. Professor Voss, I did not create that document. I saved it because Leora deleted evidence and everyone was panicking. I was trying to preserve transparency. The room turned toward me so fast, I felt the air shift. There it was, the old blade, thrown with better aim. Seraphine had not changed. In every life, she believed the world was a mirror, and all she had to do was choose which reflection people saw. Professor Voss looked at me. I looked back. My whole body wanted to explain, defend, plead, vomit out every year of pain at once. Instead, I remembered the grade elite box and the 8-word email. I said nothing. Voss glanced at Rourke. Rourke removed a second printed sheet from his folder. At 2:19 a.m., he said, candidate Arden submitted a deletion report to the Integrity Office including platform logs, owner metadata, and a warning comment advising faculty verification. Her access after deletion was 0. Your saved copy, candidate Vale, was created at 2:21 a.m., renamed at 2:24, and distributed through 3 channels between 6:41 and 8:03. Seraphine's face did not collapse immediately. That was the terrifying thing. It adjusted, because I thought she was destroying proof. You thought, Voss said, that the proper response to suspected assessment material was to redistribute it to the cohort. Someone near the back made a small sound, half laugh, half gasp. Seraphine heard it. For the first time, her eyes flickered. Then came the part none of them expected. Professor Voss lifted the sealed packet from the front desk and held it up without breaking the seal. "There is no answer key for today's qualifying assessment," he said. There never was. The document circulating under that name was a controlled integrity marker generated after last year's breach, seeded with false questions, false answer patterns, and embedded access tags. It was not sent to candidates by this office. It was placed in a restricted audit environment. Anyone possessing a copy obtained it through unauthorized access or downstream distribution. The hall went silent in a way silence had never sounded before. It was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of 100 minds realizing the floor beneath them had been painted. Myra's voice broke from the doorway.
No.
No. Seraphine said it matched the paper. Voss turned slightly. The paper has not been opened. Those 6 words ended more futures than shouting could have. Students who had memorized the saved copy began to unravel. One girl covered her mouth with both hands. Ivan sat down on the floor, as if his bones had been cut. Mira stared at Seraphine, betrayed not because she had been led into fraud, but because the fraud had not worked. Seraphine's tablet slipped half an inch in her grip. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Nobody told me." Deputy Marshal Rourke said, "That is generally how unauthorized materials work." Under different circumstances, I might have laughed. Instead, I felt something inside me unclench so sharply it almost hurt. The disqualifications happened on the spot. Not later, not after parent calls, not behind a committee door where Seraphine's father could make donations sound like concern. On the spot. Each candidate who had saved her copy received a red provisional disqualification stamp on their exam admission record before being escorted from the building. Their names would not appear on the sitting roster, their sealed packets would remain unopened, and their cases would move to formal review, with the saved copy logs attached. The Academy had designed the process after the scandal from my first life, except in this timeline the scandal had not yet happened. That was the strangest cruelty of rebirth. Sometimes the future arrives early because your old suffering already taught the world what to prepare for. The cohort tried every defense. They said it was only a study guide. They said everyone had it. They said Seraphine told them it was clean. They said I had opened it first. They said deleting it looked suspicious. They said the assessment pressure was unfair. Every excuse fell into the evidence bins with their phones. When Mira passed my desk, escorted by a proctor, she stopped just long enough to whisper, "You planned this." Her eyes were wet, but not with guilt. Never with guilt. I looked at her carefully, at the girl who had slept 3 feet from me while feeding my name to wolves, and said, "No." I left. Her mouth twisted. "Same thing. Only to people who needed me trapped," I said. The proctor guided her forward before she could answer. Seraphine was the last to be removed because Seraphine always believed delay was negotiation. She asked to call her father. Denied. She asked for the dean. Already notified. She asked whether her record of service, scholarship work, and class monitor duties would be considered. Voss said they would because leadership made distribution more serious, not less. The sentence landed like a slap wrapped in velvet. Her mask cracked then, not fully but enough. "Leora accessed it," she said, louder now, turning to the room.
She did.
She admitted it. Why is everyone pretending she's pure? I stood before anyone could tell me not to. The chief proctor frowned, but Voss did not stop me. Maybe he wanted to see whether I would hang myself with emotion. Maybe he wanted the room to hear the difference between panic and testimony. I kept my hands at my sides. I accessed it because my roommate sent me the link and asked whether the format looked official. I said. I saw one page, wrote that it looked wrong and should be verified, deleted the document when I realized people were treating it like answers, and reported it before breakfast. You saved it after deletion, renamed it as a clean answer key, and distributed it. Seraphine's nostrils flared. You set me up. No, I said. I removed myself. You picked up what was left. The hall held its breath. For one terrible, Bright second, I saw my first life layered over the room. Myself crying, Seraphine calm, classmates relieved that blame had found a poor girl instead of a popular one. Then the vision thinned. In its place stood Seraphine Vale, holding the tablet like stolen fire, while every camera in the ceiling recorded her. She did not leave quietly. Girls like Seraphine are taught that quiet is for people without leverage. She turned toward the cohort gathered in the lobby and said, "Tell them I was trying to help you." Nobody answered fast enough. That silence was its own betrayal. I saw comprehension flash across her face. She had built loyalty out of convenience, and convenience had a short memory once punishment arrived. Mira looked away. Ivan wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Another student, Talia, pointed at Seraphine and said, "You told us Leora made it." It was not courage. It was self-preservation changing costumes. Still, it mattered. Voices rose. "You said faculty leaked it. You said your mentor confirmed it. You said everyone serious was using it." Seraphine stepped backward as if their words had physical weight. Voss raised a hand, and security moved in. Not violently. Blackwell was too polished for violence in public. They simply closed around her with calm bodies and institutional authority. As she passed my row, Seraphine looked at me, and all the sweetness was gone. What remained was not fear exactly. It was disbelief that I had stopped being a surface she could write on. "You'll regret this," she whispered. I thought of my first life, of rejection letters, empty rooms, hospital lights, my mother's hands shaking as she packed my academy scarf into a drawer because she could not bear to see it. "I already did," I said. That was the point. After the disqualified candidates were removed, the hall looked half empty. Empty chairs sat beside sealed packets that would never be opened, little monuments to greed. The remaining candidates stared forward with the stunned obedience of people who had watched lightning choose specific targets. Professor Voss returned to the front. "The assessment will begin in 10 minutes, he said. Candidates remaining in the hall are reminded that integrity is not a slogan recited after convenient choices. It is often the inconvenient choice itself." It was the kind of line administrators loved, but for once, I did not resent it. When the bell rang again, and we finally opened our packets, the first question was nothing like the shared doc. Not a little different. Not rearranged. Nothing like it. The false answer key had prepared the cohort for a ghost exam, a test built out of last year's rumors and deliberate traps. The real paper was hard, elegant, and merciless in a different way. It asked us to reason, not recite. It punished memorization without understanding. It rewarded the exact boring, lonely studying I had done while everyone else traded shortcuts in encrypted chats. For the first 10 minutes, my hand shook so badly that my letters slanted. Then the old rhythm returned. Read. Underline. Breathe. Build the argument. Ignore the empty seats. Ignore the past. At some point, rain stopped hitting the windows, and a thin strip of sunlight fell across my desk like a quiet apology. I did not forgive the universe. I kept writing. When the exam ended, nobody cheered. The remaining students filed out in a hush, each carrying the fragile relief of people who survived because they had not been invited to the wrong table. In the lobby, red notices had already been posted beside the candidate list. Provisional disqualification pending formal review. The names were not visible, only numbers, but everyone knew. Phones buzzed as parents arrived, deans called meetings, and rumors learned to sprint. Seraphine's mother swept through the front doors in a cream suit, face frozen with social terror. Her father followed with 2 lawyers and the expression of a man discovering that donations are not keys to every lock. They went straight to the administration wing. I sat on a stone bench outside beneath dripping ivy and ate the granola bar I had packed because in my first life I had forgotten food and nearly fainted after the hearing. Mira found me there 20 minutes later. She looked wrecked. Her eyeliner had run, her blazer was open, and the little gold friendship pin we had bought together at orientation still clung to her lapel like a joke that had overstayed its welcome. "They're saying we might be barred from the next sitting," she said. I unwrapped the last bite of the granola bar. "That sounds serious." Her face crumpled. "How can you be so cold?" I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because cold was what people called a girl after using up all her warmth. I learned from the room, I said. You all made it very clear what warmth was worth. She hugged herself. Seraphine told us you planted it. And you believed her because believing her got you answers. Myra's mouth opened, then closed. There are moments when silence tells the truth because the lie cannot think fast enough. She walked away without apologizing. The formal review was supposed to take weeks. It took 3 days. That was how I knew the academy was frightened. Institutions move slowly when truth is inconvenient, quickly when liability has teeth. On Monday morning, the entire honors cohort was called to Assembly Hall A. I sat near the back between two girls who had never spoken to me before and now kept glancing over as if honesty might be contagious. The stage lights were too bright. The dean stood at the podium with Professor Voss beside him and Deputy Marshal Rourke near the aisle. Seraphine sat in the front row with her parents, no longer in uniform. That detail mattered. Blackwell students wore uniforms to disciplinary assemblies unless the academy had already removed their standing. Her braids were gone, replaced by a severe low bun. She looked older and smaller, as if the weekend had taken back all the borrowed glow. The dean read the findings in the same solemn voice he used for scholarship announcements: unauthorized possession, distribution, misrepresentation of assessment materials, coordinated reliance, obstruction through deletion of chat records, and attempted attribution to a reporting candidate. A ripple moved through the room at that last phrase. Reporting candidate. Not suspect.
Not enabler.
Reporting candidate. My hands folded together in my lap. I did not smile. I was afraid if I did, I would start crying instead. Then came the penalties. Every candidate who saved or used Seraphine's copy was disqualified from the sitting and removed from the merit consideration cycle. Those who distributed it further faced suspension. Those who lied during verification faced expulsion review. Seraphine, as origin distributor and class monitor, was expelled immediately, barred from future Blackwell assessments, and reported to the National Academic Registry for integrity violations. The hall inhaled. Her father stood. "This is excessive," he said, voice carrying easily. My daughter acted under confusion caused by another student's deletion. Professor Voss adjusted his glasses. Your daughter renamed a controlled integrity marker as a clean answer key and distributed it with instructions not to contact faculty. She was 17, her mother snapped. So was the student she attempted to implicate, Voss said. His eyes moved briefly toward me, then away. That small acknowledgement nearly undid me. In my first life, adults had spoken around me as if I were a stain on furniture. In this one sentence placed me back inside the room as a person. Seraphine turned in her seat and looked over her shoulder. Not at Voss. Not at her parents.
At me.
Her eyes were red but dry, burning with something too proud to become remorse. For a second, the assembly hall vanished, and I saw every version of her. The girls smiling at breakfast, the witness in my hearing, the savior of the cohort, the thief of blame. Then the dean said her name again, and security escorted her out beneath the portraits of alumni who had survived by being less obvious with their crimes. The cohort did not become kinder afterward. That would have made the story too neat, and life, even a second one, has never been neat for girls like me. Some students avoided me because I reminded them they had almost been caught. Some hated me because they had been caught. A few tried to apologize, but their apologies arrived dressed as explanations. I was scared. Everyone was doing it. Seraphine made it sound official. I didn't know you reported it. I accepted none of them quickly. Forgiveness, I had learned, is not a discount code people can apply at checkout once consequences become expensive. Mira moved out of our room by Wednesday. She left behind one blue sock, a cracked mug, and the friendship pin on my desk. I dropped the pin into an envelope, wrote her name on it, and placed it at reception without a note. The room felt enormous after she left. For 2 nights, I slept badly, waking whenever the radiator knocked, convinced someone was opening the door. On the 3rd night, I sat at my desk and opened a new document. Not shared. Not public. not named anything dramatic. I titled it Study Plan My Own. Then I began writing from page 1, not answers, not shortcuts, but the things I actually knew, the things no one could steal by downloading a copy. It was boring work. It was peaceful work. For the first time in either life, boring felt like freedom. Results came out 6 weeks later under a sky so clear it looked artificial. In my first life, results day had been the day my expulsion became public entertainment. Students had gathered around the digital board and watched my name disappear from the cohort ranking as if the screen had performed a magic trick. This time, I stood at the edge of the same crowd with my hands in my coat pockets and my heart refusing to behave. The board refreshed at noon. Names appeared. Numbers shifted. Someone screamed with joy. Someone cursed. Someone started crying into her scarf. I scanned from the bottom first because old fear has habits. My name was not missing. It was not hidden in the middle either. Leora Arden sat in 7th place, high enough for the Crown Fellowship interview, high enough to make my knees weaken. Not first, not perfect, not a revenge fantasy carved in marble, but real. Real mattered more. Around me, people noticed. Their whispers changed texture. Not accusation. Not pity. Something closer to reluctant respect, which was uglier than kindness, but more durable. Professor Voss appeared beside the board, holding a folder. "Miss Arden," he said. My stomach tightened, out of reflex. He handed me a sealed letter. "Your incident report has been formally cleared. The committee also noted your early disclosure in its recommendation." I opened the letter with fingers that felt distant from my body. Invitation. Crown Fellowship interview. Candidate in good standing.
No disciplinary notation.
The words blurred. I blinked hard until they sharpened again. That evening, I walked to the old footbridge behind the library, the place where I had once stood after my expulsion hearing and thought about how easy it would be to vanish from everyone's memory if I simply stopped fighting. The river below was swollen from rain, brown and fast, carrying leaves, paper cups, and one bright red umbrella someone had lost upstream. I leaned on the railing and let the wind sting my face. Rebirth had not made me noble. It had not turned me into a saint with perfect timing and spotless motives. I had deleted the shared answer doc because it was right, yes, but also because I wanted them caught. I wanted Seraphine to feel the floor disappear. I wanted Mira to understand that using me came with an ending. I wanted the cohort to learn that a shortcut can become a cage if the wrong person holds the key. Maybe that made me less pure than the heroine people like to imagine. I could live with that. Purity had never protected me. Precision had. Boundaries had. Evidence had. My phone buzzed once. A message from an unknown number lit the screen. "You ruined everyone." I looked at it for a long time, then blocked the number. The river kept moving. The sky kept darkening. Somewhere behind me, Blackwell's bells began to ring for evening study, calling students back into warm rooms full of books and ambition. I stayed on the bridge until the last bell faded, not because I was lost, but because for once nobody was waiting to drag me somewhere I did not choose. At the Crown Fellowship interview, they asked me what leadership meant. The panel expected something polished, something about collaboration, courage, service, the usual words students arrange into pretty fences. In my first life, I would have given them exactly that. I would have smiled, folded my hands, and described leadership as carrying others. This time, I thought of Seraphine carrying a tablet through the dining hall like a torch. I thought of Mira standing outside our door, with a key that no longer worked. I thought of the delete button, the warning comment, the empty chairs in Hall 3. Then I said, leadership is knowing when a group is walking towards something wrong and refusing to make your conscience available just because they call it unity. One interviewer looked up. Another wrote something down. Professor Voss, seated at the end of the table as an integrity observer, did not smile, but his pen paused. I continued, "It is not enough to say no quietly if your silence leaves harm behind. But it is also not leadership to let people use you as cover for choices they already made. Sometimes the most responsible thing you can do is remove your name from the lie and report the door before everyone runs through it." The room stayed silent for a moment. Then the chair of the panel nodded. "That is an unusual answer, Miss Arden." I met her eyes. I had an unusual year. For the first time, saying less felt stronger than explaining everything. I received the fellowship on a Friday afternoon. There was no grand ceremony yet, only an email, a scholarship portal update, and a call from my mother that dissolved into sobbing before she managed a full sentence. I sat on my dorm floor with my back against the bed, listening to her cry, and felt the strange ache of a future becoming possible one ordinary detail at a time. Tuition covered. Housing secured. Research placement offered. Candidate in good standing. The phrases were not poetic, but they were mine. Later that night, I opened the old group chat. It had been silent for weeks, abandoned after the investigation. Its name changed from Honor Survival Squad to something blank and bitter. I scrolled back to Seraphine's message from that morning. Everyone stay calm. I downloaded the answer doc before Leora deleted it. I'll redistribute the clean version at 7. Do not message faculty. Do not create confusion. In my first life, those words had been invisible because nobody wanted to read them as guilt. In this life, they were archived in the disciplinary record, preserved with timestamps, no longer a whisper but a verdict. I did not screenshot it again.
I did not need to.
Instead, I left the chat. No speech. No final message. No dramatic exit for the people who had mistaken my access for permission. The screen returned to my home page, quiet and clean. Months later, when new first years asked why Blackwell's assessment platform now displayed a warning every time students opened shared files during exam week, nobody told the story correctly. Rumor turned Seraphine into a mastermind, then a victim, then a cautionary myth with better hair. Rumor turned me into a whistleblower, then a snake, then a genius who baited the whole cohort with a fake answer key. None of it was true, not fully. The truth was smaller and sharper. I saw a shared answer doc. I deleted it. They saved the copy because they wanted what it promised more than they feared what it meant. That was all. That was enough. On the anniversary of the assessment, I walked past Hall 3 and saw a new sign fixed beside the doors. Integrity begins before the paper opens. It was a stiff little sentence, very Blackwell, probably approved by 3 committees and 1 nervous lawyer. Still, I stopped in front of it. Behind those doors, I had once been destroyed by a file I barely touched. Behind those doors, in another life, I had watched the people who used me learn that evidence has a memory longer than popularity. I touched the edge of my student ID, breathed in the smell of polished floors and rain, and kept walking toward my interview prep session. No one followed. No one needed to. This time, my future was not a shared document, not a saved copy, not a version someone else could rename. It was locked under my own name, and when the screen asked if I was sure, I finally knew the answer.